Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. And this is another film. It's the third one I've made. It's the second update about the Pentyrch UFO incident. The reason I made this particular film is that, as some of you know, the other day it was the third anniversary of the Pentyrch UFO incident, and those of you who have been following the case will maybe have already thought about the actual event itself and what would happen on the anniversary. And I'm pleased to tell you that the third anniversary of the Pentyrch UFO incident has not gone unnoticed and unannounced, because Kaz and Gari, Kaz Clarke, the primary witness, and Gari Jones, the principal field researcher into this case, have organised an event. They organised an event in Pentyrch itself to mark that anniversary. It was in the pub, the Lewis Arms, the local pub. We had a room there, and they basically had just a little talk, but it was quite well done. In fact, it was very well done, with a projector, with lighting, with microphones and multiple cameras and things like that. It was all very, very well, very sophisticated actually, because I don't think those guys have actually organised an event before. So well done to them. I was very honoured to attend myself. There's no way I was going to miss that, and I'm very, very grateful and very honoured that I was allowed to be one of the speakers. And a bit later on you're going to see my talk at the event, and also there's a link in the description box to an entire video. In fact, there's a little post I've done on Hapanwo Voice with an entire video directed by Gari Jones, which covers all the speakers in that particular incident. It was a really great couple of days actually. In fact, well, it was sort of overnight. It was beautiful weather, absolutely beautiful weather. We've had an early spring in Britain this year, and the weather was absolutely fantastic. It was warm, it was sunny, gorgeous. And so I went up to Pentyrch, got the coach to Cardiff, just like in the first film. I got the coach to Cardiff, and I stayed overnight at a Travelodge. Now, I didn't stay at the airport this time. I stayed at Cardiff West Services on the M4, which I thought was quite convenient. It's quite close to Pentyrch. In fact, it's about a half hour's walk from Pentyrch, so I thought, great. When I got there, I realised that you may be able to see this on the map, that you can't actually just get anywhere from the Cardiff West Services unless you drive, unless you go there with a car. I had to get a taxi to the hotel and check in, and then go to Pentyrch, and I found out that I'd have had to get another taxi from there, which went the long way round along the motorway, and right round Pentyrch. So I thought, I want to walk, it'll save me money, and I couldn't. There was no pedestrian access. Then I found that there is actually a road which links the area to Pentyrch exactly, and it runs just 20 feet or so from the from Cardiff West Services, but for some reason there's no pedestrian access between the service station, which includes the hotel, and that road. So I thought, sod this, I'm an ex-hospital porter, so I climbed over the fence. I had to push aside some barbed wire. It wasn't a very high fence, luckily, so I managed to get over that fence, and I walked to Pentyrch. I got a lift home from one of the delegates afterwards. Now, at this point you're expecting me to cut to the actual footage that I filmed at the event, which I did, of course, is what happened in the first and second films, but unfortunately I don't have any. I actually did not take my camera with me for this particular event. There's no reportage at all, I'm afraid. I actually made a point of leaving my camera at home. The reason I left my camera at home was as a reassurance to a man called Dave. This is a man that Kaz very kindly introduced me to when I was there. When I arrived, she took me to meet Dave. Now, that Dave is not his real name, and I'm not going to say anything about him to describe him, his physical appearance or personality or anything about him. He wishes to remain completely anonymous, and this is why I said to Kaz, tell Dave I'm leaving my camera at home. I'm not taking it with me at all. I wasn't even going to take it with me and say, well, I'm not filming Dave. I said, I'm not taking my camera at all. Dave is a man who, like many UFO witnesses, guards his privacy very fiercely. Contrary to what the skeptics tell us, that we're all out just to tell a big story and make money and become famous, The majority of UFO witnesses, firstly, don't make a penny, even those that do speak out like Kaz. But it's, we don't make a damn penny off it. And most UFO witnesses actually don't really, are very reluctant witnesses. They don't really want to be in the position they're in. Kaz doesn't. I don't think Kaz actually welcomed this experience into her life, particularly from what I gather. Although she may say differently. I get the feeling she didn't really intend. She certainly didn't intend this thing to come into her life. And Dave certainly doesn't either. So I will say absolutely nothing about who Dave is. Now, when I spoke to Dave, Kaz introduced me to him, and then she just stepped aside. She went out and left me alone with Dave, because she didn't want her presence there to influence what he told me. And indeed, when I was speaking to him, I was very careful not to ask him any leading questions. So I said to him, for example, I didn't go up to him and say, "Hey, Dave, did you see this triangle in the sky? What Kaz saw? Did you? I didn't say anything like that. I just went up to him. I just sat down with him and I said, "Dave, what was it you actually saw that night 3 years ago?" And he told me. And he said things like, he mentioned some other things, such as he said that on Pentyrch Common there was a pile of scrap metal lined up along the side of the road. And I didn't lead him. I didn't say, "Is this the stuff that the army picked up," like Kaz said? Or I didn't say anything like that. I just said, "Well, where did that come from then?" And he told me the army had picked it up off Pentyrch Common. What Dave described was that he mentioned the aircraft flying over the house. Indeed, there was another gentleman there who also heard the aircraft flying over the house. I also met someone else who'd seen the strange people wandering around the day after with the orange jackets. And Dave basically was in his house in Pentyrch, and he heard aircraft. Then he saw the red lights. He saw red lights appear in the sky, and he ran out to the gate, like Kaz, with Kaz, and the lights formed a triangle. And he said something very interesting then. He said that, the way he described the lights, he said that this is slightly different from Kaz's description, they seem to turn inwards and shine, they seem to shine in a beam inwards. So I thought it's very interesting that he thought of that. That's someone who's making something up like that probably would not come up with that kind of detail. There was several other differences. For example, he didn't describe any structure within the triangle, although Kaz did. He didn't mention the hand of lightning, although he might have seen it. But he also had a very, very different experience from Kaz in the sense that he actually entered the field. Kaz stayed by the gate, and he entered the field. Dave actually went into the field to get a closer look. And he describes how he saw two strange people in there, people dressed in dark clothes, who were walking around in the field, and they didn't see him. This sounds to me very much like a Men in Black encounter. And this was just before or during, I can't remember whether it was just before or during the actual appearance of the triangle. Now, I must point out, I may have made some errors in what I've just said, because basically I couldn't record anything Dave said. As I explained, he didn't want to be recorded. I couldn't take notes. I just had to speak to him and remember, and I made some notes afterwards. Straight after our meeting, I made some notes. So he describes, he said he didn't describe the hand of lightning, although he may have seen it. But what you have is he does describe a weird, strange feeling of not knowing the passage of time. And that again is what Jenny Randalls, a famous ufologist, calls the Oz factor. It's where you somehow feel it involves some kind of shift of consciousness, which seems to accompany these particular events. Now, the skeptics will say that's because people are basically losing their mind, they're intoxicated with something, or they've taken drugs, and that is the source of their experience, the source of the encounters, what they see. They're just hallucinating. Now, as you know, I don't go along with that idea. I don't believe that the Oz factor has any bearing on the objective reality of what people are encountering. Now, there's all kinds of reasons to believe that there was an objective element to what happened at Pentyrch. Another thing that is interesting is that Dave described the weird snow. Now, this is when they went up to the bald patch, and I'll be saying more about the bald patch in a minute, because I did manage to visit it. I said there's no footage by me, but there is some footage by somebody else. The bald patch is basically where the craft, we don't believe it touched down, but it came very close to the ground, the object, and the pyramidal object. And this hand of lightning is what looks like an electrical discharge, although it actually wasn't. Well, it may not have been, because there doesn't appear to be any burn marks there on where it actually touched down. And you'll see more of that in a minute. But it certainly resembled an electrical discharge. And it has had an effect on the environment. There was this weird snow as well. Now he described falling snow. Well, he thought was snow. It's obviously, that's the word they used, but it wasn't snow. It was had the consistency of polystyrene balls. He said, he just said it was like the little beans you get in bean bags, which are tiny little balls of polystyrene. He said it was like that. Now, what Dave told me is very, very similar to what Kaz saw as well. It's remarkably similar enough for me to say that they basically had the same experience. I spent some time with this guy. I met some people that he knows around him, and I think he's telling the truth. I think Kaz is telling the truth, as you already know, and Dave described something very similar, which leads me to believe that he was telling the truth. So really, it was very, very interesting. It was very extraordinary to meet him, actually, because I did say to Kaz and Gary, I'd like to talk to someone else who was involved in this. I really would. And they said, well, yeah, you can talk to Dave. So Gary and Kaz said I could talk to Dave. So they introduced me to him, and I must say, thanks very much for doing that. It was very, very interesting to talk to him. Now, while I was there in Pentyrch last Tuesday, something else very strange happened, and I think it has a direct relationship to what happened at Pentyrch, although not this particular UFO event, but it is very, very in tune with the research that has been done, and it involves aircraft. This is a very, very interesting picture. This is basically a map of Wales and the surrounding area, and it shows the airways. That's what these lines are. These are routes taken by aircraft, and it's particularly busy over South Wales, as you can see, because of course there's the big international airport at Rhys. There's also many other smaller airports as well, military bases, etc. So there's this big network of airways, air routes, all the way over Wales. Now, one of the things that we discovered, because of course this was one of the updates that Gary was talking about. Now, it's interesting if you go to the, and indeed Kaz mentioned this too, if you go to the link in the description box to the events where I wrote about it, you can watch the video that Gary produced of the event, and you can find out all how this happened. But it turns out, you see, there was a major shutdown of these airways, not just over the area of Pentyrch, but over the entire country. Indeed, for a certain period of time, the entire airspace of Wales was shut down. The entire country was basically a no-fly zone, all the way from Holyhead to Chepstow. Nothing was in the air. That's a very, very strange thing indeed. Now, that wouldn't be done unless something very serious was going on. And indeed, the strange thing is that when Kaz and Gary published this information, the flight tracking website that they used changed its policy. You now have to pay quite a considerable amount of money to use it, or you have to enter all your personal details and basically dox yourself to the host. I wonder if that is a coincidence. I doubt it. I've come less and less to believe that such things of coincidences ever happen, especially not very extreme ones like this. Now, this is the aircraft I was referring to. This is an E-3 Sentry, which is run by NATO. It is a reconnaissance aircraft. That big antenna you see on the top of it is actually a very, very high sophisticated radar device. And we actually mentioned this in the previous videos actually we did, because Kaz was talking about this as well. It is indeed a large aircraft that is used for military operations to detect things. This is what was flying backwards and forwards over the South Wales area the night of the 26th of February 2016, along with all the other aircraft that we described in the previous films. Now, the strange thing is, while I was in Pentyrch,
You think I'm going to... I'm not going to tell you that this aircraft was flying overhead, or another aircraft was. I'm not going to tell you that this aircraft was flying overhead while we were there. But it was flying over Cambridge. Now, the particular aircraft in question, it may not be this model you've seen before you, but it's the same type of aircraft. An E3 Century, like I say, maybe a different airframe, but still the same type of aircraft, was flying over Cambridge in England. Now, I wonder, is there any UFO activity in Cambridge? Does anyone know of any UFO activity that was reported in Cambridge the evening of the 26th of February this year, 2019? Because as we said in the previous films, the unusual aircraft activity is an indicator that something UFO related might be about to happen. I haven't found any myself, but if anyone knows anything about that, please do tell me. I'd be very interested to find out. Now, this here is a handsome young chap you see before you. Is me. This is me outside the pub in Pentyrch, just about before the event began. The event began at 7:30. There are a couple of talks before mine, Kaz and Gary, and then me. And what you're about to see is a recording by Gary of my talk. So I hope you enjoy it. This, of course, as you can see here, I'm wearing my Wales rugby shirt because of, it is the Six Nations going on at the moment. So I hope we'll explain that to you. Now, this here is a handsome young chap you see before you. Is me. This is me outside the pub in Pentyrch, just about before the event began. The event began at 7:30. There are a couple of talks before mine, Kaz and Gary, and then me. And what you're about to see is a recording by Gary of my talk. So I hope you enjoy it. This, of course, as you can see here, I'm wearing my Wales rugby shirt because of, it is the Six Nations going on at the moment. So I hope we'll explain that to you.
My name is Ben Emily Jones. I am a ufologist and researcher into all things to do with the paranormal ufology and government cover-ups. I have a website called Hospital Porters Against the New World Order, and I was a hospital porter for 23 years. And as a result of that, I myself took part in a secondary role with various military exercises related to the NHS. The Ministry of Defence and the National Health Service are regularly partners in dealing with the kind of things that they are claiming is accountable for what happened on February the 26th, 2016. I can absolutely assure you there is no way that would ever take place unless there was a very, very obvious paper trail that this had happened. Simply saying, oh, this was a military exercise, we're telling you now, we're presenting you documents after the fact, is a sign of a cover-up. I'll say that much definitely. I'm going to say that from my own considerable experience with these matters. I think this case, the Pentyrch UFO incident, is an incredibly important case. Not just because of the nature of the actual event itself, but because of the flow of information which has been uninterrupted since day one. And that is very, very rare in ufology. Very often there's a gap between the event happening and when research begins. The classic example is the Roswell incident of 1947. It was 30 years before any real proper research was done into it. In this case, research has begun on day one. It began on day one, thanks to the bravery and dedication of Kaz Clarke, the primary witness, and of course Gary, who's been searching this in the same way, independently, without any backup from any organisations. I must say also that despite the fact there's a lot of good people who've been supporting Gary and Kaz and anyone else involved in this, there are others who I normally have a lot of respect for, people like Richard D. Hall, who I consider one of the best people in this business, quite frankly, who I'm very disappointed with. I think their response, or lack of it, in the case of Richard, he appears to have some kind of blind spot when it comes to this particular event. And his own coverage of this event falls far short of his normal standards. And I can't work out why that is. That's very, very strange that he does seem to have something, all kind of limiter in his mind that's preventing him from what he's doing, from actually speaking about this properly. Very, very strange indeed. Like I said, because this is such an important case, what it is in ufological terms is a CE2 plus crash retrieval. That's the ufological terminology for what we have here. Which basically means there was a real event here. Something came down to the ground. The government secretly salvaged the decisive physical evidence that was left behind by whatever happened here 3 years ago tonight. And they put out a cover story. And they put out a cover story about what happened. They told people just don't take no interest in it. Go, turn around and walk away. In this sense, what happened here at Pentyrch is very, very similar to several other UFO cases, which indicates that there is some kind of long-term policy with the government when it comes to this. It's a global policy as well, because whenever this happens, almost any country in the world, you get the same response from the authorities. You get the cover-up, you get the fob-off story, and things like that. The Roswell incident of July 1947 is a perfect example of this. Happened in New Mexico, USA. And there's a couple in this country too. In Nottinghamshire in 1987, there was a very similar event that happened in an area called south of Mansfield, Nottinghamshire, which I believe was the crash of an extraterrestrial object. And what you have with whenever these things happen, is another thing that's been mentioned and has been certified with the Pentyrch UFO incident, and that is foreknowledge on behalf of the government. And this is, I think, a very, very mysterious element to this. The very fact that there were aircraft in this area beforehand indicates that they knew something was going to happen. They didn't know the exact spot, otherwise they could have had troops on the ground in the field. But they knew within a rough area, something strange was going to go down. And they covered the whole area around South Wales. I know they nipped across the Bristol Channel, the Seven Seas it's called around here. And they went to Exeter and they came back again. But they were waiting for something to happen in this area. And you see that also in Nottinghamshire. You see the fact that there were troops moved forward to local air bases and local army bases, which means they could respond within 3/4 of an hour when this craft crashed. You get to see the same thing in the Bedouin Mountains UFO incident of January 1974. Another case from Wales, from North Wales this time. Somewhat more famous than this event here. Why this policy exists? I don't know. But for some reason, the powers that be in this world don't want us to know the truth. That the human race and this planet is being interacted with by a number of extraterrestrial civilizations. We are part of a living universe, yet we are told we are just a tiny little oasis of life in an infinite cosmic desert. And as Carl Sagan said, there's nothing out there, nothing but noble gases and carbon compounds, and we are alone. Well, I don't think we are alone. I know we are not alone. And what's more, there are powerful people, if indeed they are people, who are running this world, who know that as well. The problem is they don't want us to know. Now, I've known Kaz for a long time. I've spoken to her many times about this event, about this particular incident. Today I met another man who had had the same experience or similar experience to Kaz. He was with her when she saw the strange object in the sky. And Kaz introduced me to him this afternoon. He's known as Dave, not his real name. I understand why he doesn't want to give his real name. And Kaz says, you talk to Dave. I'm not going to interrupt. And she didn't. I spoke to Dave and I asked him questions. I didn't lead him. I just asked him as if I just met him and it was the first time I'd heard about it. So, for example, he told me that there were, on the side of the road by Llantrysant Common, there was a lot of scrap metal lined up. And I didn't say to him, oh, is that the scrap metal that the army picked up? I didn't say that. I said, where did the scrap metal come from? And he said, the army cleared it up, which is exactly what Kaz told me and Gary's told me as well. I think he's telling the truth as well. I think this is an unreal event, and sooner or later, the truth has to come out. The truth cannot be hidden forever. It seems that the conspiracy, the truth embargo, as Stephen Bassett calls it, an American exo-politician and ufologist, campaign for disclosure, he says it's like an immovable object. But the truth is an irresistible force. And sooner or later we're going to have that classic meeting of the two contradictions, and the truth will come out. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Ben.
Now, before I did my talk, Gary took me back to the location at Pentyrch to see the bald patch, and you'll remember the bald patch from the first film.
Gap in the trees, you'll see an area of grass. Trees there. If you look through the gap of the trees here.
Yes, I see green patch of grass there, yeah.
That's where the hand of lightning came down.
Right.
And if you see the trees in front where this thing went across, they are dead.
Yes, that's right, these two here.
Yes.
Those trees have been killed. Were they like, I mean,
No, they weren't before.
they weren't like before,
The very
yeah.
next morning they'd had all of the life sucked out of them.
Yeah, because all the other trees look alright. I mean, of course, it's hard to tell this time of year, but you can see there is like the remains of foliage on these trees here and here over here. But those two are dead. They're completely dead.
They're completely dead.
So they didn't sprout any leaves at all during the summer.
No, nothing.
Right. So this looks like almost like the hand of lightning.
The
Sucked,
EMF
yeah.
readings go across these fields, diagonally across this field, beyond those trees, and then turns and goes back towards the ball patch where that hand of lightning came down, because, as I said, the field rises there. Where I thought it was coming down, it was actually, the field was rising up to meet it, if that makes sense.
And here is the ball patch. I'm going to actually show you a little clip of video that Gary shot there in a minute, but first of all I'll just have a look at these photographs, because as you can see, this is an area within the third field. That is the one to the north of the second field, and it's what's happened is, since the incident in February of 2016, there's a large patch in the field where very little seems to grow. There's some grass, but nothing larger. This is a field which is basically a patchwork of long grass, snake grass I think Gary called it, and very, very short grass which is regularly eaten by the sheep. And according to Gary, the sheep will not go in there for some reason. Their sheep often graze there, and they will not go in there. And Welsh sheep are very, very hardy indeed. So it's for something very, very strange. They're not fussy eaters, these sheep, normally. So what's going on? Now this bush here, which I believe is gorse, is the only significantly large vegetation growing in the ball patch. It's very, very strange. It seems to have survived whatever the effect of the approach of the strange object was. And what appears to be the case, and you see this at Nottinghamshire as well, is that the effects of the presence of the UFO are temporary, and it appears there is a little bit of recovery from the event that happened 3 years ago. And we've seen this, as I said, in the Nottinghamshire case, where at the time the vegetation was just, everything was killed stone dead. It was like a desert, and sand was put on it, and then very, very slowly things have returned. Bushes start growing, and eventually trees come up. It seems we may be seeing the same thing here, possibly, that there was an effect caused by this UFO, and the original damage was much worse, but you see there is slow recovery of some of the plants, and this should continue actually during the coming years, and you can be sure that Gary and Kaz will be monitoring that situation very closely. This is a shot taken away from the ball patch in the other direction, southwards towards the second field, and you can see quite clearly the normal level of vegetation in that field. You get this long, coarse grass in clumps, with short grass in between, which is regularly eaten by the sheep. The question is, why is it not like this on the ball patch as well? It should be like this over the entire field. There's no reason why there should be this ball patch there. At least there may be several reasons, but it seems coincidental, strangely coincidental, that the bald patch is in the exact spot where the UFO came closest to the Earth, at least either touched down briefly or small or partly, or it came very close, and there was this hand of lightning that Kaz and the other witness describes, or that Kaz describes rather, coming down from the object, and it happens to be exactly there. And as you can see, we were monitored by eyes in the sky while we were exploring the bald patch. Actually, I don't know what the purpose of this aircraft was. It just may have been an ordinary aircraft just passing, but it happened to fly above us while we were in the field. It's just gives you an idea of something like what you might have seen on the day of it actually happened, or in the days leading up to the event, although the aircraft were flying much lower that time. And this was not, we don't know what aircraft this was, whereas the ones that were flying over Pentyrch that day were definitely RAF assets and NATO assets, the E3 Sentry and things like that. As you can see here, this is the beautiful weather we had. Pure blue sky, no chemtrails or clouds, and very warm indeed for February. Absolutely lovely. Now here are the two trees which I pointed out in the first Pentyrch film, which are completely dead. They're still, far as I can see, as dead as firewood. I mean, they've not sprouted any leaves this spring. I think they're finished. And these two trees are perfectly healthy up until that night in February 2016. Whatever it was that came down from that aircraft, that spacecraft or object, whatever it was, the UFO, it had an effect on the environment which caused the bald patch, and we believe caused the death of these two trees. Now, this is rather strange. I didn't know about this until Gary told me on the day he took me to the third field. This is the kind of thing that would probably interest Maria Wheatley and maybe several other people. It appears there's the remains of an ancient megalithic site in that field. It's right on the southern end, near the two dead trees, on the border between the second and third field. It's dismantled, whatever it is. It's in pieces, but there are some rocks, as you can see here, strewn around quite randomly. It appears they've been broken up. They used to be apparently part of an ancient site dating back many thousands of years. We're not sure exactly when or where. Maybe Maria and other people know better about this. They may have already heard about this, but according to Gary, there's some strange symbols carved on one of these stones. I'm not sure which one. We couldn't find it. We looked around, we couldn't find it. If I get an update on the strange symbols, I will let you know. So thanks to Gary for showing me the third field and the bald patch, much appreciated. And yeah, very, very odd case indeed. I didn't have time to go and see it on the first video, and it was nice to do it this time. So whatever happened here, it certainly left an impression. It has left an effect on the environment. It's probably a good idea there were no people in the field at the time when this particular strange object descended. Anyway, we have a little video now of the area made by Gary.
Oh, okay, this is Gary Jones, independent UFO field researcher, and I'm with Ben Emlyn of Hospital Porters Against New World Order, a fellow UFO field researcher. Hiya, Ben.
Oh yeah, how you doing, Gary?
Well, I've brought you over to the place we call the Bald Patch. I'll just do a little pan of the area, just so that people can see. This is where...
Its name. This is how it's got its name.
This is why we call it the Bald Patch, because everything else has this nice sort of snake weed grass, I believe it's called.
Yeah, we had to walk through it. It's actually very thick all around
very
the
thick.
field. It's difficult to actually walk to this point because there's no path, and you've got to push your way through these very tall, stiff grass.
If I can just zoom in.
But here, it's like...
That's where we came from, that broken tree in the middle, more or less, the entrance to this place. And you come all the way through it. And this is why it's so interesting for people like us, is because this is where high EMF readings were recorded. This is where the hand of lightning was seen. Ben himself, as you can see, I mean, nothing has regrown in that area since. Anything that seems to try to grow doesn't really fare well.
It's actually 3 years to this day.
3 years, yes, I should mention that. Third anniversary of Pentyrch UFO incident.
And still, there's obviously an effect on this land because the thick grass can't grow here. There's a few patches, but it doesn't look very healthy. There's just some gorse or whatever this bush is as well.
Yeah, I think they're gorse bushes.
That are just dead.
I'll have to...
So whatever it was, that the effect of the presence of this object obviously had a serious effect on the ground under which what we call the hand of lightning appeared. These bright flashes of what looked like electrical discharge onto the ground. Doesn't mean that's what they were. I mean, there's no sign of any burning or anything.
Well, actually, I should point that out actually, because those bushes down there, the earlier photographs show that they were more brown on the inside of the bald patch than the outside.
Oh right.
So it seems that since the time that, you know, because I got it in October 2017, so you're talking about a year and a half nearly. It looks like at least it's regenerated itself. But like I say, I mean, it seems like
they may well recover over time. I mean, things are growing back in the bald patch in Thieves Wood in the Nottingham's case.
Well, just to show you, I mean, I'll just see if I can get. I mean, this grass here, from what I could see last time, was much more paler. It had a more sort of dead plasticky look to it. But it is sort of, you know, getting more green and looking a little more healthy. So maybe this has managed to repair itself some bit. I mean, I've just seen, well, one of the farmers now, he was actually spraying lime in the fields over there just to sort of raise the pH levels of the soil. Now I don't know if that's, I don't think that's anything to do with this, but it's just interesting that, you know, 3rd anniversary here we are talking about problems with the land. And
so is there a problem like with acid or something?
I don't know.
If he wants to put the pH up because it's too acidic.
Apparently it's an annual thing they do. And
I'm a townie. I mean, sure, some country bloke will be saying, "Oh Ben, it's pretty obvious why they do that. We farmers do it all the time," you know. But
probably they do.
Yeah, maybe nothing to it.
But yeah, you saw the sort of like what they look like, ancient stones or old centuries old stones, and
yeah, there's some old like monoliths. What looks like the remains of maybe a megalithic site here.
It does.
So Maria Wheatley will be interested in that.
It does look like there may have been a circle or a stone avenue, a row of stones, something. And it goes in that direction down towards Bristol. It goes down that direction, which leads to Bristol, sorry, and across the channel. And if it lines up the way I've seen on certain maps, it looks like it goes to Stonehenge.
Right.
So, and then if you follow it back that way, it would go up to Pembrokeshire, where the stones were quarried for the Stonehenge.
That's right, yeah.
And this is a place that seems to intersect that.
That's a very interesting sort of like connection because, yeah, the builders of Stonehenge went all the way to Pembrokeshire to get the right stones for their monument. They dragged them all the way without any modern technology. They just dragged them on the ground or with rollers and things like that. So yeah, it's like maybe there's some kind of like ley line connection here because UFOs. There's a connection between UFOs and ley lines. You know?
Yes, I do agree with that.
Bruce Cathy, he said a lot about that.
Yeah, so what do you think, Ben? Just give us last impressions before we go to our updates for the day.
This is a very interesting case. It should be more prominent, actually. There should be more people looking into it. I'm quite surprised, actually, that several people in the UFO community are actually not really taking this seriously. I think they should.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Gary.
Now, the Pentyrch incident, like many UFO incidents, has a profound effect on the people involved, and that effect goes beyond simply the strangeness and wonder of seeing something from another world. It has repercussions on their everyday lives and how they interact with other people. It sometimes reaches the point where it's hard to tell where the weirdness begins and the normality ends. And Kaz, I'll explain in a minute exactly what I mean, but Kaz, Gary, they've had strange things happen to them. And guess what? I should have expected this. Now it's happened to me.
And this here is the landline in my house. This is a landline phone, which actually does not just belong to me, it actually belongs to the entire household. This is just one of 2 handsets we have. I tend to use it more than anyone else. I'm the one who tends to use this the most. 95% of the time it's me that answers it, therefore, because it's usually me. And if it's from the others, I just pick it up and shout it, and they go, I should shout it's for them, and I go and pick it up. Now, something very odd happened late in January, on a Friday evening. It was just a Friday, actually. It was actually just 1 week before I headed off for Denmark, and I think that's significant, actually, because of what happened. It was about 6:20 in the evening. I was just sitting there, minding my own business, as I always do in my room here, when the phone rang. And so I said hello, and then his voice answered, a gruff voice, a male voice with a very upper class accent. He said, "Is that Ben Emlyn Jones?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I think you should have nothing more to do with Clarke. She's a liar and a con." And then he says, he went on to say either con woman or con artist. And I missed the last part of the word because I interrupted him. I said, "Who are you?" I butted in. But he said either con woman or con artist, and that was con something. And he replied, "It doesn't matter who I am. This is just some friendly advice. Stay away from Clarke." And I said, "Who are you?" I repeated again, but he ended the call. And that was very, very strange, that. I dialed the call back, withheld number. I contacted my telecommunications service, and they put me through, as usual, to a Filipino operator. I think these guys, they earn about 5p a day or something. And he said, he explained to me, he's a very polite Filipino man, he explained to me there was no way that they could trace that call. He said they need like a police, some kind of police or court order to do that, or some authorization from the police. But he did give me some advice on nuisance or scam calls, and a few minutes later they sent me an email with an information package about that. Now, the thing is, it is very unusual for me to receive any unsolicited calls on that landline. I sometimes get them on my mobile, but not on my landline. Never, in fact, I've never had an unsolicited call on the landline because the number at my home is ex-directory. It's also off all. It's also off the mailing lists for various telemarketers. There are literally only about 20 people who have this number, the number of my landline phone, and they're all people I know and trust. Now there are a couple of exceptions actually to that, but they're relatives and friends of my housemates, and they're mostly in Sudan, and they're not acquainted with me in any way. And if they call, like I say, I just put the others on. I certainly didn't recognise the mysterious posh voice on the other end. It was nobody I know, and like I said, everybody who has this number I know and I trust them. Now, it's really weird. I don't that this happened. I mean, I started thinking about this for a long time because I phoned up Kaz after I'd done my inquiries. I phoned up Kaz and talked to her about it. Obviously, as you know, I don't think Kaz Clarke is a con woman. I think she's telling the truth. I've thought over what this phone call was, what happened. Even, I don't know who it's from, but I wonder, in fact, I suspect it is connected with my talk in Denmark. Because the call came the day, like I said, 1 week before I had to go to Denmark, and it came the day after I sent my slides package to the organisers of UFO Denmark. And I wonder if my email reached other recipients without my knowledge or permission. Now, Kaz has reported how she herself has been through this. So has Gari. Kaz has been harassed in a similar way. She's had weird people turning up. Even someone visited her once. They made contact with her. Now, the man who actually visited her made some veiled threats to her family, which has made her feel very uncomfortable. Now, the phone call I received was not threatening. It was not even particularly intimidating, but it has made me aware of some possible interest behind the scenes in the Pentyrch UFO incident. And the people who were there when it happened, and researchers like myself who take an interest in it. And the thing is, I did, as you know, from the video I made. If you watch regularly, you'll know. If not, go and check out Facing the Danes, this video I made. I did mention Pentyrch in my talk in Copenhagen the following weekend. And I think the reason I got that phone call is somebody did not want this subject going international. Well, I'm not going to alter what I was going to say because of this anonymous caller. I did wonder actually when I got to the airport, and I think I mentioned this in my I think I mentioned this in the video actually, Facing the Danes. I did wonder if some kind of obstacle would get in the way of me. Maybe I was turned back at customs or something in Copenhagen. I did read all the rules. I made sure my luggage didn't have any contraband. I had made sure my passport and everything was in order. I had all the documentation I needed. I had my health insurance stuff, and everything was all sorted. So I thought it was unlikely, but I thought they may have some trumped up excuse to stop me entering the country. And luckily, that didn't happen, as you know. The talk went very well. So up yours to whoever made that call. And I'm not going to. If you know, Kaz and Gari can be, they're willing to speak out, and they've had much worse kinds of intimidation than I have. So I'll be damned if I'm going to stop talking about this event because of some posh bloke who phones me up and says, "Oh, I have nothing to do with Kaz Clarke." He couldn't even introduce himself and tell me his name. Oh dear. So I wonder if you've been involved with any UFO event and you've had something similar like this happen to you. Let me know. I mean, put it in the comments. Put a comment and tell me. In fact, I know that this has happened to many people, not just about Pentyrch, but about other UFO events as well. It's very common. and the government say that this doesn't exist. Why all this fuss then? So, that's it. This is the 3rd anniversary of the Pentyrch UFO incident. When the 4th anniversary comes round, in a year's time, will we know any more than we know now? I don't know. But maybe, maybe not. But I'll tell you what, myself, Gary and Kaz, and many, many other people, I'm sure, are going to do everything they can to find out more, to learn more about this event. So we will have another update for you in this series of films. It's not going to go away. This is, as I said in my talk, the flow of information, because it started immediately, now cannot be stopped. Sooner or later, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I can feel it. It may be part of the more general disclosure situation, or this may even be the trigger event for disclosure. It all depends on how much we can dig up and how much is revealed and how much can be found out. If anyone watching this actually has any information about this particular event, when you're watching it and you know something that I don't yet, feel free to contact me. I'm there to be discussed. My email address, bennyj74@gmx.co.uk. It is actually in the Panwo TV blog. You can find it there, or you can contact Gary Jones on Facebook. He's open there to be discussed. Or Kaz, you can maybe want to talk to her. Maybe if you're a fellow witness, especially, you may want to talk to Kaz Clarke. She's also on Facebook. Get in touch. Tell us more. So, I can't wait. Can't wait for the next update in this series, because I'll tell you what, it may be sooner than you think. Thank you for watching a Panwo TV. Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.